welcome to our satellite symposium, where we're taking this opportunity to look at clinical trials clinical trials and research, ensuring patients and researchers' values align. And my name is Karen Fleming. I'm one of the co-chairs for the summit and the education coordinator at the Sickle Cell Awareness Group of Ontario. And thank you all for joining us today. And I would also like to take a moment to thank all of our panelists for coming today and opening up a discussion that we don't get to really have very often. And I'm going to start also with introducing our two moderators for the session today. So to start off, we've got Ms. Lanri Tunji-Ajayi, who is the president and CEO of the Sickle Cell Awareness Group of Ontario. And her advocacy work has resulted in improved patient access to life-saving and disease-modifying therapies. Her advocacy achievements include a national research program, provincial sickle cell groups coming together, inclusion of sickle cell in the newborn screening program of most provinces, drug approval, and the enactment of June 19th as the National Sickle Cell Awareness Day. She has been recognized with the Senate Canada 150 Award, 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women Award, and most recently, the Meritorious Service Medal conferred by the Governor General of Canada. Her passion for sickle cell advocacy stems from a personal instance hitting close to home. In the late 90s, her brother, Sunday Afolabi, suffered from avoidable and treatable complications of hemoglobin SS disease, or sickle cell disease, leading to his preventable premature death. This propelled within her a passionate interest in patient quality assessed care, which led to her immersion in sickle cell disease health advocacy and research initiatives. So welcome to Ms. Lanri. Our second moderator for today is Dr. Dawn Richards. She is the founder of 502 Labs Incorporated and Director of Patient and Public Engagement at Clinical Trials Ontario. With a PhD in analytical chemistry from the University of Alberta and experience in a variety of roles during the past 20 years, it is her diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis in 2006 that started her journey to combine her passion for science with making the most of her diagnosis. In her role as CTO, Dawn is charged with executing on CTO's strategic pillar of patient and public engagement. I welcome both of you and thank you for moderating the session.
Thank you very much. It's so nice to be here to have not only the clinicians, but also the industry partners and individuals with lived experience on this session today. I always believe that sickle cell disease is a puzzle, that we must put all the pieces together and we are all part of that puzzle. So I would say that over the years, patients have been tagged as subjects in research. However, more recently, there has been a shift to the use of more preferable terms such as partner or stakeholder in research. But are we there yet? There is still a lot that needs to be done, a lot that we need to learn in order to ensure appropriate visibility of patients participating in clinical trials and research, as well as aligning the values of clinicians, patients, and industry as partners. Today, Dr. Dawn Richards, the Director of Public Engagement at the Clinical Trials Ontario, and myself will be having a candid discussion with you, our esteemed panelist, and she will be asking you to introduce yourself today. I also want to just also mention that for those who are our attendees, to kindly put your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and we will take these questions as we move forward. So I'll pass it to Dr. Dawn Richards. Thank you.
Thank you, Lanri, and thank you, Karen, also for the kind introduction. I'm really pleased to be here as part of this afternoon's discussion. So as Lanri indicated, to start things off, it would be helpful for us to just go around the room and introduce yourselves briefly. I think it's better for you to do that than Lanri and I to try and do that. It's always more useful when it's in your own words. And so I'm just going to go around and ask people to let us know a bit about themselves, the perspective that you're bringing to this afternoon's discussion, and really anything else that you're comfortable sharing with the group. And Landrace told me we need to do this in 30 seconds or less. So I'm going to start by calling on you, Lance.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lance Archer, and I am a patient living with sickle cell disease, specifically hemoglobin SS. I serve on the board of directors for SCAGO and also is the chair of the Patient Advisory and Advocacy Council within SCAGO. Outside of SCAGO work, I am a mental health clinician, and I am working on a PhD in clinical psychology.
Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Lance. I appreciate you going first. I saw the look on your face. You're like, oh no, I have to go first.
I was surprised. Yeah.
So thanks for that. Fitzanne, how about you next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Fitzanne Howell. I am a warrior that lives with sickle cell disease, hemoglobin SS as well. I am the deputy chair of PAC, so the Patients Advisory and Advocacy Council. So many A's in that word. But outside of that, I own my own business, and I am working on my fourth diploma. And I'm about to graduate and become a fully licensed massage therapist at some point.
Thanks very much, Fitzanne. It's great to meet you. Next, I'm going to go to Julie.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. My name is Julie Allen. I am Canadian. I grew up and went to school in Ontario, Southwestern Ontario. I currently reside in the US, and I work for Global Blood Therapeutics as the head of development operations. And on the 5th of October, GBT was acquired, and we are now part of the Pfizer family. I oversee all the clinical operations and clinical trials for our portfolio at GBT. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Julie. Next, I'm going to go to, I hope I pronounce your name correctly, Dr. Ziad Sol.
That's actually perfect pronunciation. Okay. Thank you. So my name is Dr. Sol. I'm a hematologist at the London Health Sciences Centre in London, Ontario, Canada. I'm the medical member or medical advisor on the Patient Advisory and Advocacy Council of the Sickle Cell Awareness Group of Ontario. And I'm also a member of several equity and diversity committees at our hospital to ensure equal access to care for patients. And we are very interested in having more studies available for our patients to access kind of the most novel therapies. So we are excited to be opening some trials locally and hopefully around the country.
Great. Thanks for joining us today. Next, I'm going to go to Shirley.
Hi, my name is Shirley Miller. I am a warrior living with sickle cell for now 66 years, and I still work full-time. I work for Forma Therapeutics, and we were just acquired by Novo Nordisk. So we are a new company now, and I work in patient engagement.
Thanks a lot, Shirley. It's great to meet you. So I think I'm going to go to one of your new colleagues, if I'm not mistaken, which I think is Zoraida. Are you also at Novo Nordisk?
I do. Hello, everyone. So my name is Zoraida Saudi. I'm a medical advisor at Novo Nordisk and a clinical development manager as well for the rare disease portfolio that will include sickle cell disease. I also have the pleasure of leading the medical affairs activities within the sickle cell disease space here in Canada. I'm a fairly new immigrant to Canada because I joined with my family a little bit over 2 years now ago. I'm originally from Algeria, North Africa, where we also have I also worked on sickle cell there because we have a good population of patients there. So thank you for having me. I'm very pleased to be here with you today.
Thanks a lot, Zoraida. Next, Christine.
Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here today. My name is Christine Harris. I live with sickle cell anemia, and I also work at the Canadian Cancer Society as an innovation manager. Much of my work is about working and collaborating with different kinds of stakeholders to design interventions and solutions to make healthcare experiences better, most specifically in cancer. And a lot of what I do is co-design with patients and people with lived experience.
Great, thanks a lot, Christine. And I think last but very not least, Nikki. And Nikki, can you please help me out with your last name?
Certainly, Dr. Richards. So my name is Nikki Oladumoye. I'm really happy to be here today. So thanks for the opportunity to present. So I currently work at Pfizer Canada. I'm based in Hamilton, Ontario. I've been with Pfizer for 6 years, and I'm the medical lead in Canada for a sickle cell portfolio, as well as other rare disease portfolio drugs. And I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. And thanks for being gracious when I ask you how to pronounce your name. To all of you who did so, I really appreciate that. And I think on behalf of Lanre and myself, thanks for taking the time out today to have a conversation with us. It's really nice that we can have such a mix of individuals who bring really different perspectives, and some of you bring dual perspectives to your roles, which is really fascinating. So I think, Lanre, I'm going to pass things over to you so that you can start with the questions.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you everyone again for joining us this afternoon. So we have 2 to 3 questions to ask each one of you. And I will start by asking, I'll start with Christine, if that's okay. This is a diversity, equity, and inclusion question. And the question is, do you think that patients with sickle cell disease are involved enough in terms of setting and developing research agenda in Canada? Also, how can we improve patient participation in clinical trials? So in essence, in what ways do you think researchers could incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion into their research? Thank you, Christine.
Thanks very much. I guess I'm starting things off. So I think the first thing I wanted to say, and it's absolutely demonstrated by some of my co-panelists, is the importance of valuing lived experience as expertise. That's the first thing I wanted to start with. And you know, it means that patient voices are treated equitably, they're compensated appropriately, and look at the patients as a whole. You know, patients or people with lived experience are more than that. They have a life and identities outside of being a patient. And I think that's really important to recognize and value. The other thing is that there is other expertise that all of these people with lived experience, including myself, bring to the table. And that might be an asset in your research or in your studies when you are involving patient partners. So ask, ask the patients, the people with lived experience that you're engaging, what their background is, and you might be pleasantly surprised at how they can also bring another expertise to the work that you're doing, which is really exciting. And like I said, my co-panelists demonstrate that. We know, and Lanre said, like, patients have historically been the subjects of research. And there is a shift right now that is happening to include patients as partners. And it's a significant change that requires commitment and time and energy and resources to do, you know, well. And I absolutely have grace in understanding this takes time. The work is uncomfortable, but it's a mindset, and it requires ongoing integrated commitment in everything that we do. More and more, I'm seeing research calls and projects for patients, which is great. For some of those projects, it's often after a proposal's been developed. And so sometimes there's an opportunity to provide feedback, but not necessarily to help shape that research and the work that's being done. And so I'd like to encourage folks to think about engaging when thinking about the team, really thinking about the person with lived experience as being a member of that team, and or caregivers or advocates that you're engaging with, and making sure that they are a part of the policy and research discussions before the agendas are being set. Not as a requirement to check a box or as a later consideration. And so that for me is my largest call. And when you do that, you're then considering the biases that the researchers have, as well as the biases that the patients or people with lived experience have, and then getting a broader and more accurate view of the challenges that you're trying to address. So I'd like to say that, like, we can't rely on, we've already started, or we don't have the funding, or we'll do this later, or next year we are planning on. We'll never make change that way. And so this is the work that happens now and ongoing. And so even the little changes and ways that we can incorporate inclusion and equity and diversity in our work from the very beginning are really key, so that we can make little pieces of progress. Sometimes I hear when I'm engaging with folks, why can't we focus on everyone? And as a designer, you know, I like to focus on the margins. When you are working for people who are on the margins, you will often find learnings that will apply to other marginalized communities, but then you will also hopefully create interventions that serve a broader audience. Sometimes I like to think about that when I look at technology and cell phones, and a lot of some of the communications tactics that we use were originally designed for people with disabilities, and now we all use them. And so when you look at folks who are in the margins, who have rarer diseases, when you have different experiences and include them in what you're designing for, then you're actually targeting a much larger population than probably you initially had intended.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christine. You've really answered that question very well. We'll come back to you for another question. But in the meantime, I'd like to go to Fitzian. I'd like to ask her the same question and see what her perspective is. So, Fitzian, do you think that patients with sickle cell disease are involved enough in terms of setting and developing research agenda in Canada? That's the first question. And then the second part is also, how can we improve patient participation in clinical trials? And I'm wondering if you can take just about 2 minutes to answer that question. Thank you, Christine. Sorry.
Sure. Thank you, Lanre. It's okay. I think for me, it kind of goes back to what Christine was saying as well. No, there's not the participation of like sickle cell patients in trials is slim. I think I've done maybe 2 or 3. And I think what kind of holds me back from keeping on going with these trials is that I don't feel like I'm a part of it. So you may get my opinion in the beginning, and then I don't know where the research goes. I don't know what comes next. I don't feel like okay, you got my feedback now, but 2 years down the line, what has that research helped you accomplish? What has that, who has that helped? Like Christine said, I don't feel like I'm a part of the team, essentially. And I know you guys are doing the bigger bulk of it, but lived experience is lived experience. And my experience as a sickle cell warrior and advocate is different than Christine's experience, and it's different from Lance's experience. And I think having all of those voices, one, not only ties us all together and gets us to the optimal goal of whatever the research is trying to accomplish, but I think that having more than just an incentive, like, oh yeah, you get paid for the trial or the research. It's like, no, having a part of it, whether it's the initial stages of just a proposal or the actual clinical trials of like, we've tested it and this is what has happened kind of thing. I think that just for me, I don't know if anybody else would agree, but for me, I think that's kind of what makes me less likely to participate going further. Just not feeling like I'm heard, because when you have sickle cell, it's like, oh, okay, tell me your experience. We have to answer this question every day, and we have to teach someone every day. And I'd rather feel like I'm a part of it than I'm just telling you my experience over and over and over and over again. So yeah, that's just from my perspective.
Thank you, Fritzian. So you're saying that there needs to be improved engagement. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. And our industry partners are listening, and I'm sure they are taking notes. I'll go to Lance Archer. Lance, you're the chair of the Patient Advocacy and Advocacy Council at SCEGO. So you've heard from different individuals with lived experience on different issues around clinical trials and research. Can you weigh in on this topic? Can you tell us if you think that patients with sickle cell disease are involved enough in terms of setting and developing research agenda in Canada? Also, how can we improve patients' participation in clinical trials? Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to say for sure that at this point, I do not think that patients with sickle cell disease are involved enough. I think what's missing is opportunity, and I can speak to just being a patient, and I have not seen opportunities presented for me to offer my perspective on things. I think that this speaks to the lack of inclusion. And I know that pharmaceutical companies, they are likely to operate from a place of gaining profit. And so I can appreciate that their agendas and the things that they pursue are more likely to target a larger market. But as a result of this, disorders, including sickle cell disease, are undermined or underlooked, are hardly considered. And this speaks to the lack of diversity in their agendas. Concerning equity, I have not heard of any initiatives here in Canada that's targeting sickle cell disease specifically. I know that the drugs that I have been privy to use and that which the members in the community have used have been first developed for other conditions. So I just see where there isn't a lot of opportunities for our experiences to be acknowledged. I see where interests diverge, and I also see where this is a turnoff for people in participating in clinical trials. Apart from the fact that we know that there is a mistrust in physicians and healthcare systems in general, many persons with sickle cell disease are still left wondering what's in it for me. Clinical trials are not necessarily being promoted as something that's beneficial to them individually. And so this just maintains the mistrust that many may have. And I think that for us to be able to improve participation, there needs to be greater conversations around what's in it for me so that patients can feel more involved.
Wow, that is deep. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. And like I said earlier, our industry partners are hearing, they're taking notes on, and they're looking at what needs to be done differently. I will move to Dr. Ziazol. He represents researcher and also a clinician. So we need to hear his perspective on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Dr. Zoll, in general, what resources would you utilize in informing patients and caregivers about clinical trials and research? We just heard from Lance that he doesn't even know about many of these trials that is happening. So what resources would you utilize in informing patients and caregivers about clinical trials and research, right? So we'd like to hear, your thoughts on this, right? Also, I'm just wondering, have you had patients and caregivers approach you about clinical trials? And what does your conversation with them look like? And also,
yeah, these are, go ahead.
Okay, go on. I will ask you the rest after. You answer those first. Thank you, Dr. Zoll.
Okay. I have to memorize all of them now. So I think, I started at our site here about 5.5 years ago, and I remember one of my first conversations with a patient was about, what are the trials available, and is there something other than what's currently available that I can try? And so we started on the path back then to get our site ready for such a big endeavor. Because starting studies at a site, it's a lot of work. Like getting a study open at your site is much easier said than it is done. The resources required, the research associates required, the commitment that, from the patient, and the burden we're putting on the patient who, unfortunately, yes, they get called a subject because it's research. They try to keep it very objective. They don't want necessarily to make it sound like, they know the person. That's the whole point of research. They want to keep it very objective. So a lot of those resources are quite a bit to get started. And we are, at a point now where we can do that. But from my perspective as a physician, proposing a study to a patient that I believe might benefit them or may not benefit them, that's the actual question in the research study. That's a very difficult discussion sometimes, because on one hand, it's an opportunity to try something new that could be life-changing, and on the other hand, it leaves there are risks that are very controlled in the trial, and a trial does not get accepted ethically if it's too harmful, right? But there is a tiny bit of a harm that we potentially may find in study. And that discussion is always very difficult because we need to be very open and honest about, what is being offered. And so the resources I would have, Landry, to give to patients about what research is available is, there are lots of materials offered by the clinical trial company that's running the study, to inform the patient about exactly what's happening, the schedule of events, and at the same time, there's a very long consent process to explain what's involved. And I just wanted to add my perspective on things is that my biggest concern opening a study in our hospital is that, knowing the huge resources required to open a study, what proportion of our patients that actually sign on to the study will continue on the study until the very end? Will really stick with it to answer the very important question, to find maybe novel therapies. That's the biggest concern of a researcher or a physician, really, who's trying to offer something beneficial to the patients. So it's a huge responsibility, and part of the discussion is ensuring that the patient understands the huge responsibility of getting onto a research study. Like it's not like, I'll try this medication or I'll try this for a week. If I don't like it, I'll stop. It's a huge responsibility for, the organization, the hospital, the research center, the people involved. Tens of thousands of dollars have gone into kind of having this happen, storing the drug in the pharmacy in a fridge, getting it labeled, all the pharmacists. It's quite, imparting all of that knowledge to the patient that, yes, this is a wonderful opportunity, but at the same time, it comes with commitment. And of course, you can step away from a study. There's a procedure for that, but it does leave the organization kind of, at risk of not being able to open a study in the future because it's proven unsuccessful, right, at the site. So that's from an investigator's perspective, or from a physician's perspective who wants the best for their patient, but we're taking risk by ensuring that this novel therapy is going to become accessible. So I know I've touched on a few things, Landry, but I hope I've answered some of your questions.
You have done so, and I still have another question for you, but I'll wait till later. I'll pass it to Don to take it up with our industry partners. Thank you.
Thanks, Lanre. Thanks everyone for sharing those perspectives. And, I think it's great that we've got so many different perspectives here, because I know, as Lanre said, that SCAGO's industry partners are listening to what folks are saying here. And we'd like to give them an opportunity to chat, share their perspectives too. So one thing we're interested in is, we know that many companies have diversity, equity, and inclusion, maybe programs or initiatives. And we're hoping that you can share what you can about what those look like and what that means for you as an individual within your company who may be working on sickle cell disease related clinical trials and research. And does that include working with patients and patient organizations to design studies and have their input affect studies? Or does it look like something else? So any of those concrete examples that you're able to provide, I think is really helpful. So I'm going to start this time with Dr. Nikki Adolamawe. And what can you share with us, Nikki, about what Pfizer is doing in this area?
So thanks a lot for all the comments. It's been really I guess helpful just hearing from the community. And I guess I'm speaking from a standpoint of working in rare disease. So I do cover the sickle cell as well as other rare diseases. And I know that certain communities have been underrepresented in clinical research. And I know that Pfizer, we actually did a landmark study to understand like the minority disparities in our clinical research program in the US. And so we did like a 10-year retrospective analysis of data from 2011 to 2020 to serve as a kind of a benchmark and a baseline for us to measure like what our progress is looking like to help advance health equity. And I know also that Pfizer is really committed to achieving racial and ethnic diversity in the clinical trials that we do have. So including underrepresented populations like women, like the LGBTQ2+ communities and people with disabilities, and also like really ensuring that the participants in our clinical trials reflect the racial and ethnic demographics where in the communities where we actually have our clinical trials. So one of the things that I know that is deeply rooted in the Pfizer culture is actually embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion in our organization. So we do have like a DE&I lead, and we actually have a lens from which we look at every aspect of the clinical trial continuum. So starting from pre-discovery to post-commercialization. So one of the things that they've done recently is actually train over 15,000 colleagues on what this means in clinical trials. Like what does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like? And we also have established commitments to help move our organization forward. So we have something called the Multicultural Health Equity Collective, and it's really focused on helping to improve health equity across ethnic minorities and other medically underserved communities. So we're making different investments in training our colleagues. We also have like an operations where it's like a library that helps us track real time, like how we're doing with our diversity enrollment, and also ensuring that as we go through our clinical trials that there's actually equal representation in our clinical trial programs. To some of the points that have been raised with the patients or the warriors who live with sickle cell disease, one of the things that we do in rare disease particularly is we actually have like a patient-centric framework, and that framework really is a long-term relationship that we have with our patient communities. And it's not tokenism. It's one of the long-term relationships we have from when we're at the bench side till we get to commercialization. And that really helps us to ensure that we're measuring the right endpoints in our clinical trials, that we're measuring the outcomes that matter to the patients and their families, that we're measuring outcomes that we're actually getting the patient's voice in understanding how we'll talk to our access community, like when we get to marketing our drugs. So I think from a Pfizer perspective, there are different prongs or different things we're doing to ensure that that we do have diversity, equity, and inclusion in our clinical trials. And one of Pfizer's values is equity. And speaking from a perspective of someone who has been impacted by sickle cell, I have family members that are impacted by sickle cell. Like I do understand the importance of having that patient voice reflected in every aspect of the drug development continuum. So I'll stop at that. I have other examples, but I'll give everyone else an opportunity to speak, and I'm happy to learn what other industry partners are doing as well.
Great, thanks a lot. It's going to be fascinating to hear what the different companies are doing, and it was fascinating to hear how Pfizer is going back into its own trial data, and so using evidence related to equity, diversity, and inclusion also. Shirley, I'd like to ask you a similar question, and you might bring a slightly different perspective given that you also live with sickle cell yourself and work in industry. What are you able to share with us about initiatives that you've seen, and feel free to pepper in any personal thoughts you have too, if you're comfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I do come from a very different perspective, having had over 25 years of experience working with sickle cell in comprehensive centers. And so I was the program manager in 2 comprehensive centers. So I was well aware of clinical trials, and I participated in a lot of clinical trials at the NIH, but I'm here in the US. And like I said, my experience is very different. At Pharma Therapeutics, the one thing I could say at that time when I joined the company, there weren't a lot of pharma companies that had a patient engagement team that they brought in just to have that relationship with patients and to build trust within the community. And that's what me and my colleague are doing. So because we were both experienced in working in comprehensive centers with patients, we brought a lot of that knowledge of what patients like, what they don't like. And I'm a patient myself, and I could tell them firsthand how patients should be included. The one thing that we always said is bring them in early and at the beginning. So when you're doing your protocol, you should have patients there so that they could help you not make any mistakes on your protocol, so you don't have any rewrites or things that you can't, have to go back and spend more money doing. So I was very impressed that Pharma brought in a patient engagement team, that already had a relationship with the community, sickle cell community, but we also do cancer, we also do MDS. So it's not just sickle cell, and we'll be bringing that knowledge to Novo Nordisk now and become a team with them. And hopefully we can help them and they can help us to expand. They're a global company. We were a very small company, but Novo Nordisk is a very global company. And so it's gonna be a lot, but at the same time, we've kind of already built that platform. So we just want to make sure that we do. But like I said, my experience is very different. I've been in clinical trials a lot myself. So I kind of know the things. And when I did it at the NIH, if I thought that they did something that they shouldn't have done or that was invasive, I would tell them, I would tell them, this is not going to work with all patients and you need to be careful about doing that, So, but pharma is very good about doing patient stories, and I should say pharma Novo Nordisk. It's very good about doing patient stories. We bring in patients for ad boards. We bring in patients for side-by-side stories. We bring them in for focus groups. We engage the patients a lot. We even have a patient advisory group. So that's very important. If you really, really want to be a partner with the community, you have to, like the young lady said earlier, you got to ask them. You got to ask them how they feel. Christine, you got to ask them about what they like and what they don't like and how would they feel about a certain thing, and they will tell you.
Thank you, Shirley. You're like the secret weapon because you've been on both sides, so to speak. So wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Dr. Soul, it looks like you've got a question or a comment you'd like to make.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to ask. Shirley, what you said was very eye-opening about the patient engagement efforts. I mean, we knew it was there, but it's nice to be reminded, I think, and how much some pharma companies really reach out to patients actively, proactively to get their input. Now, that would be really important when, to highlight when for us in clinic, when we want to approach a patient to propose a study that we feel is helpful for them. I don't think I know how, a very easy way to reassure patients that there has been a patient voice in this design. And so is there an easy way to do that, or maybe within the consent, there has to be a reassurance that this was that their voice was included? Is that something that's actively looked?
That's a good question, because we can't, push them or try to persuade them. It has to be their own, decision to go into it. But we do let them know that we have a patient engagement team. We do let them know we have a patient advisory team. And because we worked in the community for a long time, we know a lot of the people. And I tell you, the community is like word of mouth sometimes. It's who you know, and they will trust certain people that they already know. Now, that's not to say that they're loving us all the time. That doesn't happen. But the thing about it is, it's good when they know somebody who has been on a trial or who has participated or has even sat on a advisory group. That makes them feel comfortable that that person is a part of the community and they participate.
Great, thanks for that. I think we're going to move to Zoraida next, and maybe you're helping educate Shirley at the same time about what her new employer is doing in this space. But can you share a little bit with us about what Novo Nordisk does and what you've seen?
Absolutely. Thank you again for your insightful comments and testimonies. It's certainly very helpful for us. we do, I think, across all the industry partners, similar initiatives in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusions and investments within that space. I started clinical trials back in 2011, and I can tell you that I saw that shift from an industry perspective. The patient has always been in the center of all the engagements, but now their voice is being heard more and more, and they are at the heart of the projects that we are doing, and we are ensuring that we are including them very early on in our clinical trials. So the short answer would be yes, we do utilize the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusions in all our therapeutic areas, and not only rare disease or sickle cell disease, but also in other areas where we want to focus in ensuring the demographics of the trial population is representative actually of the overall disease population. In sickle cell disease, it will be a little bit more different because we also need to account for various other aspects beyond racial demographics. We have to account for socioeconomic factors, for example. And a big part of this is learning the specific needs of the intended patients, and with the sickle cell disease warriors, of course. In Novo Nordisk, we have a dedicated team that's called the Medical and Science team that is trying very hard to understand the landscape, like geographical locations of the patients, access to technology, ability to miss work or school, and really try to understand those lived experiences, and then trying to balance them and translate them with the various requirements that Dr. Saul was talking about in a clinical trial. So study visits and sampling and everything, and all the commitment that a patient needs to bring when participating into a clinical trial. So this is being done, this work of understanding is being done through various activities with the patients' organizations, the community groups, depending on the part of the world you're in, but also patient roundtable discussions that we have early on in that stage. Again, with the same goal in understanding the patients, meeting them where they are, and not only having a one-shot discussion with them, but also bringing them and talking to them at different time points during the research and just updating them on what we are doing. From a Novo Nordisk standpoint, we are still in the very early stages of clinical development for the drug, but this is something we started to do. It's not always an easy balance actually to strike from an industry perspective, because you want to generate data that are important not only to the patients, but only that makes sense to your other stakeholders, so payers and regulators, and because down the road you will have to submit for a drug that has to be accessible. It's not only developing a drug, it has also to be accessible to the patient, right? So you have to account for these other stakeholders that you have. So to facilitate all of that, we have begun engaging with patients, as I said, very early on in the development process. We did patient advisory boards, and we even started seeking their opinion on assets even before we moved them into the clinical phase for us. But this has been done on a global level, not specifically for Canada, as you can imagine. So I'd say that in summary, we are doing our best to engage all our stakeholders and hearing from the patients, putting them really in at the heart of everything that we do to serve them more and have more accessible therapies for them. And I speak not only for rare disease, but specifically for sickle cell disease. That would be my long answer.
Great, thanks, Zoraida. And last but not least, Julie, are there any other things that you can share about what you've seen in your own experiences?
Sure, and thank you everyone for your thoughtful comments and discussion. We hear you. And, you know, I would like to say that 11 years ago, GBT was birthed with a singular purpose to focus on sickle cell disease. As a company, that's all we did. That's all we do. All of our focus was ensuring that we looked at underrepresented patients and families in the SCD community globally, and driving for equity and providing options to these communities. We don't have a specific sort of diversity, inclusivity policy, if you say, but I think we're anchored in the notion of the diversity of the population and looking towards hearing the patient's voice through patient advocacy boards and striking that balance. As we said, we need to answer important scientific questions and what are meaningful to patients. Addressing the root cause of sickle cell disease, definitely our studies are designed that way. Increasing cell health, but also looking at some of the more sort of daily function, the fatigue and things of that. So we design our protocols with that in mind. We also want to hear that, sometimes answering those questions can be burdensome and heavy for patients. So we want to hear what that burden looks like for patients. And we want to open communication pathways. And as earlier said, I think Fitzanne had mentioned that, patients and people living with sickle cell disease participate in trials, and then that's all they hear. So at the core of our strategy, we want to open those lines and develop communication pathways so that we're introducing the studies and asking for input from patient advisors, but also making sure that we pull it full circle and being able to communicate what happened, what were the results of these trials, how can we increase access for patients that live greater than 50 miles or kilometers from a trial center, to allow them an opportunity to be part of trials. And so we're very focused on those types of things, similar to what my colleagues have said. And we take strong note in what the warriors have told us today, because those are things we've heard and are very passionate about. And we know that Pfizer also is passionate about those. So together we will be able to do much better, because we can do better and we must be better.
Great, thanks for wrapping that sort of portion of things up, Julie. I can tell people in the 10 years that I've been part of the clinical trials community, the things we're hearing today about companies actually engaging with patients to learn about their day-to-day experiences, their preferences. This has come a very, very long way, and it might not be apparent to people who are just starting to learn about clinical trials, but it's really gratifying to see how much patient perspectives and experiences are truly influencing the agenda, not only of companies, but of academic trials too. So I think that's just really hopeful, and we've just come so far in a decade, and I would love to revisit this in another decade and see where we are. That would be fascinating. So Lanre, I'm going to turn it back to you for kind of the next round of questions.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And I just want to say that this is the most engaging discussion, and one that I think even if we're here for 4 hours, I think people would not be bored. However, for the sake of time, I'm going to ask panelists to maybe just take 1 to 2 minutes to answer each question. I know we have a lot to say, but we want to also be able to give opportunity to the attendees to also, ask questions and so on. So just in the sake of time. So I'm going to go back to Christine, and I'm going to ask an alignment in value question. So Christine, with the current clinical trials and research landscape, do you think that the industry is researching what is important to patients and caregivers? So in essence, what would you like to tell industry and clinicians? Dr. Zoll is representing clinicians today about your daily experiences that they might not know about since they don't live with sickle cell disease. So what is being researched on, and what really would patients love research to focus on? I think that is in essence, just to ensure that alignment between what patients want, what the industry is doing. Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks, Lanre. I've really been listening to what everybody has been saying, and it's funny because, some of our partners have talked about the work that we're doing, and some of our people with lived experiences that I don't know about it. And so there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect. So it's hard for me to answer about the alignment because I don't actually know what is happening in the field and what work is being done. I'm really pleased to have heard about some of the work that different partners, industry partners and clinicians are doing. And I think the last thing I would probably say with regards to this is I often look at like the end, right? Because I, as someone with lived experience, is kind of like, what is a medication? What is some kind of intervention? How is that going to help me in my daily life? That is what is really key and of focus to me. And if I don't know if patients are a part of setting the agenda, you know, again, I'm not sure if the output is what is going to work for me. Even if it is going to be effective, will I be able to integrate it into my daily life? Is it going to help me? Is it going to make things easier for me? And it's hard to know that if I don't know what is being done. If I haven't been a part of, and I'm not saying other patients have not been, but I have not been a part of setting the agenda. And if I'm not brought along the way to see the progress in terms of how things are developing and when there will be something that I can use. So I'll leave it at that.
That is so true, because we know that not every patient will be part of a clinical trial, because there might be so many that have to be registered and so on. But it's also very important, like you pointed out, and that Fitzian also pointed out, that patients have to know what's happening. They have to be part of this journey, this story. It is about them, and there should be nothing without them if it's about them. And so I really think communication is important. There has to be improved engagement. But anyways, I will stop at that. I will go to Fitzian and ask her to weigh in on, again, how does she see the current clinical trials and research landscape in Canada? Does she think, from what she knows, she's been part of, or she heard, if the industry is researching what is important to patients and caregivers? And also, if there's any experience that, you know, you're living with sickle cell disease that you would like the industry partners to know, and maybe to help them in better determining what really is important to patients. Fitzian.
Thank you, Honoré. I think it's been stated more than once throughout the panel. If we're not informed, we're not going to know what's going on, I guess. Just like Christine said, we don't know half of the time what the trials are. And I know it takes a lot to coordinate schedules, and the, like Zoraida from Novo Nordisk was saying, they look at geographic location and can they take days off school and all these things. But if we're uninformed, we won't know that there's even a trial going on, and we won't know if it fits into our values or not. So I think for me, just having the lived experience, I don't think there's anything specific that I would say that I think they should focus on this or I think they should focus on that. Overall, everybody's lived experience is different. So they may be researching something that I may not need at the moment, but Christine may need it, or Shirley may need it, or Lance may need it, or someone else out there may need it. And that's what they're doing it for. And as long as overall the community is being heard and being looked at and focused on, that's what we want at the end of the day, whether it be for me or not for me. I think just in terms of the values, we need to be informed. That's the main thing. If we're not informed, we won't even know if the trial is suitable for us and what we go through and our lifestyles and such. Because without information, what do we have? I did trials already, and so far, I heard about them on accident. So if it wasn't me in the hospital and doctors talking to my parents, would I have even been in those trials? If I haven't have been a part of SCAGO, would I have known about those trials? No. So again, it's aside from values, they don't really always have to align with my particular needs or Christine's particular needs or whomever. But if I don't know what's out there, I'm not even going to know if I need it or not, I guess, if that makes sense.
Thank you. It just means that we have to review how we are communicating. Pharmaceuticals also have to review their communication, how they are communicating, and how are they getting information about, feedback from families, right? I see that somebody raised their hand. Julie, quickly before I go to Lynn. All right.
Thank you. So, Fitzanne, awareness, definitely point taken. Is Sickle Cell 101 or Sickle Cell Speaks social platforms that are familiar to you and individuals in Canada and Ontario specifically? Is there an awareness of those platforms? Because those are platforms that we at DBT have been leveraging to increase that awareness, to get it out there. What are we doing? And to invite directly to patients to reach back out to us. Is that something you're aware of?
I am aware of those platforms, but I think it also goes back to, unfortunately, social media algorithms suck sometimes. So you don't always see what is posted. You don't always see the stories. You don't always see the posts on the feed kind of thing. And if it's a story, it's there for 24 hours and it's gone, right? So yes, I do follow them. Yes, I follow like as many of them as I can physically follow. But again, if I am not on Instagram or Twitter or whatever the platform may be for over 24 hours, and I don't make it a plight to, okay, let's search, let's type it in and find the page and see what's going on, then I don't have any access to any of that information. So I think it needs to be, yes, social media is great, but there also needs to be another point of pushing it further than just social media, or a way to make sure that if it is on social media, it's reaching the audiences that it needs.
I agree. I know there's another hand raised, but I'm just watching the time as well. I will give both Shirley and Julie 1 minute each to speak, but I really want to go to Lynn quickly. But I also want to say that Sickle Cell 101 and the other platform you mentioned are US based, and I think that has to be Canadian based. Where you are pushing these things. So I think we have to really look at communication in general. Are you also promoting through primary care providers? Not just, even so, I know when patients go to their hematologist, they might be told about some of what is happening, but what about primary care providers? What about the patient organizations? Yep. There have to be different, platforms, right? To ensure that people, there are many patients who are not on social media, period. Yep. So we can't rely on social media as where they are going to be getting all the information, but it's good to know that those platforms are there as well for those that also are on social media.
Yeah, and Laundry, actually, I'm sad to hear that you feel that it's very US centric on Sickle Cell 101, because it is a global reach. We know it does reach even sub-Saharan Africa, but point taken, we need to do better and make sure we use multi-pronged approach for communication. And that's definitely something of focus, is to get to those primary care clinicians as well, to engage them and pull them into the fold, if you will, not just the academic centers.
Thank you, Julie. There's a comment here, so from Dr. Kirby. who is part of the audience today, one of our clinicians here in Canada. She says that sounds like there needs to be a place, perhaps Clinical Trials Ontario, in Ontario, or clinicaltrials.gov, where patients can go to review what trials are running. Patients are told about trials that they meet criteria when they attend clinics. Perhaps an awareness that there is a place they can go to check periodically, perhaps more education about where patients should be checking. And that's very, very important. And I think what Dr. Kobe is saying is that they look at patients that they feel meet criteria of certain trials. And those are the ones that they are engaging on specific trials. I also want to mention that what SCAGO has done is we go to clinicaltrials.gov, and sickle cell studies, we put them on our website to make it easier for patients to be able to find as well. But I think that's a good point, Dr. Kirby. We go to Shirley quickly for her point?
Yeah, I understand you're saying that you want things that are readily available in Canada. But if you're familiar with the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, SCDAA, Forma did a partnership with them to bring a clinical trial awareness thing where all of the Forma companies, no matter what company it was, all of the research studies being done in sickle cell are out there. So if you go to Sickle Cell Disease Association sicklecelldisease.org, you'll see they have the clinical trials thing is down there, the little mechanism, and it has all, whether it's GBT, Novartis, Forma, anybody that has a sickle cell trial is on that site.
Thank you so much, Shirley. We really appreciate that. Thank you. And like I said, also SCAGO's website also has all clinical trials that are in Canada on our website as well for our own population. Ziad.
Yeah, no, this has been a very nice discussion. I did want to echo what Dr. Kirby Allen said, that patients will not be informed in clinic about trials that they're not eligible for, whether it's by age or, pregnancy or something that excludes them from the trial. But it sounds like what I'm hearing is that patients would like something maybe more like less passive. Then go check that website if you're interested. Something more like Fitzanne, maybe you can clarify. Would you like trial information to be pushed to your email, or a list in clinic that's presented on a wall or something? Or are there ideas of how best to disseminate the information about the availability of trials so that patients can actively ask? Or is a website sufficient?
Vivian.
Sorry, she may not be there, but if any other patient representatives can speak about.
Maybe we can ask Len to weigh in, because he has not provided his own feedback on that.
I think a more direct approach will likely be welcomed. Yes, it's there on the websites and social media and all of that, but I think most patients would benefit from the opportunity to have a personal email being sent to them that advertises. So maybe that's an option as well. I feel like people may differ in terms of their preference. So maybe taking a more comprehensive approach in how we are getting the information out there would be best serve or most helpful.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Len. There's a comment from Dr. Huma Tal. She said that not all trials are opened at all sites in our countries. For example, in Canada for experimental trials, agents need Health Canada approval, and it takes a long time as well, as the pharma companies may not be willing to do so. So yeah, not all trials will be available in all sites in all countries. So that's a good comment. Thank you, Dr. Atal. I think I will pass it to Dr. Don Richards to engage our former partners on the alignment in value question. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lanry. I'm just cautious of the time. It's good that people are putting questions in the chat because we're kind of answering them as we go. And I think as Lanry had done with the last round, if we could kind of keep things short here, that's appreciated, so we can make sure we can get to the last question as well that we'd like to ask. But the question here for industry partners is, I think what we're hearing is that often people with sickle cell disease are not aware of whether or not patients have informed the study design or, been part of ad boards, etc. So I think that's really interesting for us to think about. But what would be nice to hear from you is if you have done any specific work related to patient values in the sickle cell disease area, and how or if those have informed your clinical trials. So I think maybe I'll just ask if anyone would like to kick things off, and we'll take it from there.
So I can speak to that,
Sure, Julie.
Yeah, so we have, patient advocacy team, and we'll partner more deeply with that established at Pfizer. But I know some of the questions we ask the SCD community is, what does matter to you? And so I know we're very focused on the science, right, the physiology, but we also are very mindful of what's impacting the quality of life. And we do hear about fatigue. We hear about the neurocognitive issues. And so a lot of, definitely on our Voxelotor, which is Oxbryta, that is commercialized in a number of countries and on its commercial pathway, a lot of our real world evidence, those studies are geared specifically to what matters to the patients with respect to fatigue. Does the drug impact that fatigue and energy? Does it impact the neurocognitive, the thinking, and executive function that concern a number of patients, not just the pain, but also some of those things that affect your activities of daily living. So we have a very strong sort of health outcomes team that builds out, those aspects of our clinical trials to ask those very questions, to get data to inform, is our drug impacting or affecting those?
Thanks, Julie. That's a great example. I'm really glad to hear that there's some focus on that. I don't live with sickle cell, but I live with rheumatoid arthritis. And even though my disease is fairly well controlled, fatigue is still a huge issue. So I do know what that's like. So I'm pleased to hear that. Shirley or Nikki or Zoraida, are there any other examples that you would like to share with the audience today on that topic?
I can go next.
Sure.
I'd say that with regards to the alignment in values, it's more of a journey in co-creation together with the patients. So at an organizational level, we did have a patients advisory boards and patients roundtable discussions where we brought the patients in, presented the clinical trial programs and asked them where we needed to focus on and what mattered to them. And so this, I know, has been taken into consideration in the design and tailoring of our clinical trials and trying to respond to their needs. And when I said that it is a journey in co-creation, is that as we understand the patient needs better through the processes that I just told you about, and as the patients also understand our processes better, hopefully we will both learn from each other and ultimately improve the landscape together. And as I mentioned, the ultimate goal for us is to develop new therapies that will improve their patient lives. So and for these therapies to be accessible to them, we also need to account for other stakeholders, so regulators, payers, and providers, so that they feel that they understand the benefits risks from their end, And these benefits risks also needs to meet the patient's needs. So the best I can say in this situation is that hopefully we are better today than we were yesterday, and that tomorrow we will be better than we are today with your help and the help of the patients and the communities out there.
Thanks a lot, Zoraida. It's, you know, you've mentioned a couple of times the regulatory agencies and obviously organizations like CADIF and people that also approve whether things are listed on formularies or not. So, you know, I dream of a day when we can better align all of these things so that we can really get interventions to the people who need them the most in a timely way. They're so critical for the impact that they can have on some individuals' lives. So thank you for doing that. Nikki, I'm going to go to you and then I'll come to you, Shirley, for some wrap-up thoughts here.
And thanks for all the comments. Mrs. Lanray, I'm just kind of thinking, I guess after this meeting, we probably have to do a debrief and think of solutions to some of the issues that have been raised, because I totally understand like the comment from the comment on having specific information on how to get clinical trials that are relevant to the patients. And I guess to your point, Dawn, it's more over the, I guess, 2 decades, there's been a shift and like the patient communities having momentum to help, you know, and also building the capacity and the capabilities to help engage in the drug development process. And I think all the other industry partners have kind of touched on the different parts, that it's really important for us to have, and we do that at Pfizer. We actually have patient input. We have a patient-centric framework with which we go through our drug development process, because patients have a direct stake in the drug development and they're very unique to provide their experiences and expertise about the disease. So patients also are able to help us, you know, feed directly to the researchers, like what the important endpoints are, and even if like I guess the measurements we're taking in the clinical trials make sense and actually apply to their daily activities of living. So partnering with patients, I think it's very important because it'll help us develop a better drug. One, it'll help us overall even better the patient's experience. It'll help to better study enrollment and retention. I think it's one of the things Dr. Sol has talked about. And I think we, like to everyone's point, when we know better, we do better. So I think there's still room for growth in Canada. And I really want to say this I'm Canadian, and so from a perspective of looking at countries, I feel like in the space of sickle cell, Canada has done a really good work. So shout out to SCAGO and the other organizations that work in the sickle cell community. They've really helped to elevate the voice. And I know that many companies looking into the sickle cell space would look at Canada as a space to bring in clinical trials. So I think with that said, we at Pfizer continue to work to ensure that our values in research are aligned with what our patients are looking for, and also building that relationship on mutual respect and trust is important to the work we do. And honestly, to all the points people have made today, I think there's always room for improvement. So I'll just kind of stop on that.
Great, thanks a lot for sharing that. Shirley, do you have any wrap-up thoughts here about how to best ensure patients' values are really taken into heart for clinical trials, and maybe examples of your own?
Well, I feel kind of funny because, like I say, I'm in US and things are a little different, and I'm not in medical affairs. I'm in patient engagement, so I deal directly with patients and engaging them and educating them on our study, our phase 1/2 study. And now that we've moved over to Novo Nordisk, it's almost like we're starting up again, because we're starting with another culture and everything, so you kind of have to learn that. But we definitely do things with patient advocacy groups. I mean, we engage them through their social media networks, and we actually have partnered with a lot of the ones that we call national groups to advertise and also put out information about our clinical trial. Our clinical trial, our medicine is called etavopivat, or you might have heard hibiscus. That's the other name for it. But so we try to give as much education as possible to patients so that the community is very, very familiar with it when it comes to us. Now, we've done a lot of US, and we're just now expanding into OUS. So it's kind of like we're going the backwards way. So, but that's what we try to do. We try to really do a lot of things. We've been doing a lot of focus groups with OUS sickle cell organizations to understand the landscape there, because we don't pretend to know that we know all of them. So we've engaged, Canada, Nigeria, Ghana, and Lebanon, to try to find out how do they do things there and what's realistic for them in their country, and not assume that we know already, because we do not.
What a really nice way to wrap things up, that you don't know everything and you're looking to partner with organizations and people that can help you better understand what it's like for people in different places. So thanks very much for that, Shirley. Lanre, I think back to you, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. I think we have a few more minutes left, but before we do that, I wanted to echo what has been said by everyone on this issue. Honestly, it's very, very important. My takeaway, honestly, today is communication, engagement, feedback. That's very important. We have to look at how we are communicating. We have to look at how we are engaging families, and we have to look for feedback from them. I think that's what I've taken from this session today. But before I give what I think I have a few questions more to individuals with lived sickle cell experience, because it is really important that we get their perspective, we understand, and we put into action whatever their comments are today. So in 1 minute, Christine, can I ask you, how important is it to you for the industry to work closely with patients, in Canada, right? Or if I were to rephrase it, I can also say, how important to you is the industry working closely with patients and care providers treating sickle cell disease in Canada? Do you see a conflict of interest in there at all?
So for me, I am a huge proponent of co-design, or I heard the word co-creation. So, collaboratively coming together. I think that is with the caveats that the context matters. Disclosure is really important in terms of the interests, the intentions of that work together, and potentially some boundaries in terms of we will do this, we will not do this, and just making it really clear and transparent what we are trying to do together and what are the boundaries or limitations around what we're doing together. So I would say yes, but with disclosure, transparency, boundaries.
Thank you. Christine, any comment on this? Sorry, Vivian, any comment?
I think overall, Christine covered majority of it. There needs to be a good level of transparency, openness, level of communication. So I don't think there's anything else I need to add to that point, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody within the panelists that has any comments to add? And do we have any more questions in the Q&A? If not, I would like to say that I am very pleased to have had the opportunity to co-moderate this session. To me, we've had candid discussion, and I think we need to have this type of discussion for us to really understand where are the gaps, what could we do better. It's all in the spirit of improving on what we do. We want to thank the farmers. You've been doing an amazing job. But I think you've all heard also from the individuals with lived sickle cell experience that in Canada, more can be done. I also want to just note also to say that apart from Pfizer, I think many of the pharmaceuticals we have on this call today are just coming into Canada. So we have to also understand that, right? They've not been here long. So there is that caveat, but it's good that we have this discussion. And I think this is also the reason why the SCAGO established the Industry Alliance Council. It is a puzzle. I kept saying it. Sickle cell disease is a puzzle. We have to work together. Patients, caregivers, industry, advocates, everybody. And through that alliance, the patient voice can be raised higher. And it will also help the industry to really understand the Canadian landscape and what Canadian patients are looking for. So on that note, I want to thank everyone again for being part of this panel, the industry partners, the Dr. Ziad representing the clinicians, and our amazing individuals living with sickle cell disease who have really been very brave to bring out their own perspective and bring their voice out on this panel. And without taking much time, I will pass it to Dawn to give any final comments, and then Karen will close this session for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lanre. Just a couple of closing comments for me. First of all, Lanre, I want to thank you because you've always been so amazing to work with. I've learned so much from you about your own journey and sickle cell disease and this amazing community that you're part of. So I wanted to say thank you for bringing me into the community and at certain times and for allowing me the space to be part of it. I'm always very honored to be part of these events. As a basic scientist, you know, my heart just palpitates in the best ways when I hear things about lived experience being expertise, and the fact that people who are designing medicines and trials are really looking to that lived expertise for input and insight. And I just think we've come such a long way, and I'm a big proponent in we can do so much more together than we can in our own silos. So these types of conversations help break down those silos, and it's just been an honor for me to be part of today's discussion. So thanks to all of you for sharing the past hour and a half with me. I've learned so much, and I'll pass it over to you, Karen, to wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you to all the panelists and our moderators today like especially when we look at our patients and industry. So just really wanting to separate that out. Thank you guys for making the time for this open conversation to happen. I'm sure lots of people had little nuggets that they didn't even consider. And so it really will just help us keep this conversation moving forward. I would also like to take a moment to thank our sponsors of the summit, our gold level sponsor, Vertex, our silver level, JC, and I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, I will certainly learn how to pronounce it correctly, and bronze level, Global Blood Therapeutics and Pfizer. Again, thank you all for joining us. Let me just stop screen so I can see you guys one last time. And tomorrow morning, we're back at it, 10 a.m. So please join us again, and thank you all. Have a safe and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.